All right, guys, I just want to welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today, here, me and Nick will be doing our Week 7 Thursday and Friday college football analysis and predictions. 6 games going down over the 2 days that kick off Week 7, starting with Coastal Carolina going on the road to James Madison as 10-point underdogs. Start with an offense that's been showcasing nice balance. Ethan Vasco at quarterback. He's the second leading rusher on the team. He also has 220 yards per game through the air. Only completing about 58%. Only 2 interceptions, so he's protecting the ball. Has 3 different receivers of over 200 plus yards, led by Jamison Tucker. And then Cameron Wright has over 20 yards per reception in his own right. This has been a very good offensive line for CCU as well. That's why they're able to protect their quarterback and then also run for about 200 yards as a team. Christian Washington being the lead running back there. Going up against the James Madison team, that they played fairly well on defense, and of course they played some pretty poor opponents. And North Carolina had over 600 yards playing from behind in that one that saw a significant amount of points. But for the most part, they've been a stout defense. They've got 10 interceptions, second most in FBS. Trent Spence leading the way there at corner. He's a senior. He's been just splendid for them. The run defense has also been great for the Dukes. Trent Hendricks, Eric O'Neill, they've been very good. And again, they're going up against the tough Coastal offensive line. On the other side, you got JMU. They're going up against a rushing defense that's been pretty poor. And they're putting up about 180 yards per game in their own right. George Petway at running back leading the way. Alonzo Barnett has been an interesting story so far this year. He's been highly productive. 16 total touchdowns, putting up over 300 yards per game as a dual threat player. I mean, he's really taken the college football world kind of by storm, and it started with that North Carolina game where he absolutely put on a clinic, and they have 4 different receivers, 200-plus yards. So they're really spreading the ball out well. Very productive offense so far. They had 400 yards against Louisiana Monroe, but they lost that game, Nick, 19-21. It certainly is a bit of a sting for a team that's trying to compete for a potential nod in the CFP. 10-point line here. I think Coastal Carolina's going to cover. I think JMU is a good team, but I think they're a little overvalued. I don't think they're all that great. They, again, put 70 on North Carolina, but Gardner Webb, 2 weeks before that, they only beat them 13-6. They just lost to a pretty poor team, and they ran it up on Ball State. That's certainly good, I guess, but that's not a very talented team at all. So I think this team might be a little overvalued. They just had one phenomenal effort against UNC that I think makes everyone think this is just one of the best teams in terms of the group of 5, and I just don't think they're there right now. So I think Coastal Carolina, they're going to come in. They're going to play a very good game, at least on the offensive side of the ball. They'll be able to compete in this one, but at the end of the day, I think they will lose because their run defense is tad poor.
This is an interesting matchup on Thursday night. Certainly the game to watch. Kind of an eliminator in the Sun Belt Eastern Division right now, as the West is pretty weak this year in the Sun Belt. You have Monroe on the top of that division with Louisiana not too far behind them. But I think the East is the better division with Coastal, Georgia Southern, and JMU all kind of battling it out. I think whoever wins this game gets a leg up in the chase to win that division crown and compete in the Sun Belt Conference title game. This is a very interesting matchup. I like what Coastal been able to do on offense. This team has been solid this year. Their one loss was to a Power 4 team in Virginia, a team that's been a lot better than I think a lot of people expected. They won a shootout against ODU this past weekend. They beat down on some bad teams prior to that. Vasco, I've been happy with him, right? 1,100 yards passing, 7 touchdowns, 2 picks. He's been really comfortable, really confident. Facing against a James Madison defense that is known for forcing turnovers, so he's got to be smart here. Got to protect the football. When you look at Barnett for JMU, he's been incredibly fun to watch as a quarterback dual threat option. 1,200 yards passing, 12 touchdowns to 1 pick, plus really solid numbers on the ground. Petway's been a really good complementary back who's been able to really provide a nice bit of movement on the ground for them. I do like what the receiving core looks like for JMU. I'm going to pick JMU to cover in this game. Pick them to win this game. I don't feel entirely confident about it. I think this is certainly a toss-up and more close on paper than people expected. ESPN's FPI analytics has it a 75% chance for JMU. I think it's closer to 60-40, maybe even 55-45. I think these are two teams that are very balanced in this conference right now. Coastal, they're playing a lot better on offense than I think we expected this year with the scheme that they're running. They put up 45 points against ODU. They put up 40 against William & Mary and 20 and 55 against Jacksonville State. So they have been able to score a lot of points, while James Madison has also found a way to score a lot of points. But they've also had off days. They struggled against Monroe in a bad loss. They struggled against Gardner Webb, a team they should have beat a lot easier. I like the Dukes this one. I think the Dukes will get the job done. I'm not too super confident about it. I expect a lot of points. The over-under is at 60.5. I expect the over in this game. I think there'll be a lot of points in this game from both teams. But I think JMU's rushing attack against a weak Coastal Carolina rushing defense will be the key point here. I think Barnett will have a good day on the ground, and Petway will be able to complement him and balance out the rushing attack. This is certainly a game I'm tuning into Thursday night. I think it's a really important game for the conference and a solid game highlight on ESPN2. I'll be watching this one. I'm interested to see how it balances out. I could see it going either way, but right now I'm going to pick the home team and the favorite to cover and get the job done.
I think it will be a game worth watching. I was over on ESPN2. Two teams that certainly have hopes of winning this conference. It's certainly wide open. So this will be a good one. 10-point line, 16.5 total. Going down at 8 o'clock on Thursday, CBS and Sports SSN, that is, sorry. LA Tech hosting Middle Tennessee. 4.5-point favorites are the Bulldogs. Interesting game here. Middle Tennessee, 16 points per game. They've been very poor. They've played a pretty difficult schedule up until this point, though. But I think at the same time, they haven't really showed much of a pulse. And on the other hand, LA Tech, they've played tough defense. They've allowed 400 yards in a game this year. Neither of these teams can run the ball. 127th in FBS rushing for MTSU, 129th for LA Tech. I mean, that's as disastrous as it gets when it comes to running the ball. For Middle Tennessee, they've played Ole Miss, Western Kentucky, Duke, and then Memphis 4 games in a row. So a pretty tough schedule up until this point. Nicholas Viato, that was a pretty good quarterback. His numbers aren't maybe the greatest. He's putting up 257 per game passing, has 5 touchdowns on top of 4 interceptions. Hasn't done much of his legs this year, but at times last season showed the ability to do so. Amari Kelly has been a good receiver for them, almost 100 yards per game. Holden Willis at tight ends, also a nice little talent they have. LA Tech, on the other hand, they're worse running the ball by a little bit. They don't have much stability at quarterback. They've had 3 different guys throw passes so far this year. I'm not fully sure if that's due to health or they're just trying different things out. I don't know. Jack Turner was the original starter. Evan Bullock got to go against FIU, and they only put up 10 points in that loss on the road. So LA Tech right here, it's kind of, not been any better for them. Very similar teams, though. MTSU's defense has been bad, but against very good offenses. So what will we see here? Because we don't really have a true read on them in terms of conference play. Both teams' only win came in Week 1 versus FCS opponents by single figures. I'm going to take the Dogs here, Nick. I think Viato is a good player, and I think he's overall going to be the difference maker. But neither of these teams have impressed so far this year. Both offenses are incredibly poor. LA Tech, though, their schedule certainly isn't anywhere as tough as the one MTSU has played. They've hung in around in games, though. They lost the 10 by NC State for whatever it's worth. I'll take the Road Dogs in this one, though.
This is a tough matchup, certainly to predict, because these are 2 teams that are really bad on offense. Not terrible on defense, but not really that great either when you look at LA Tech. Their rushing attack has just really been non-existent this season. They have 130 carries for 318 yards total on the season, 2.4 yards per carry. Not a good number at all. They really are struggling to run the ball, struggling to pass the ball. Jack Turner looked okay at times, but not great. He had 2 picks. Blake Barker looked even worse. He had 3 picks, was completing only 50% of his passes. Bullock has come in, looked a little bit better. He has 1 touchdown. He does have a 70% comp rate, so he is accurate when he throws the ball. I think they're going to roll him out in this matchup on Thursday. When you look at Middle Tennessee, I think Viato is a better player, the best player, on these 2 teams in terms of offensive pieces. So I think that's certainly something that you want to take a look at. And this team has played some tough matchups, and they've been able to get some stuff done in that. They're also equally struggling to run the ball. Although Jaden Cradle is not a bad back, he has 4.8 yards per carry and 2 scores on his 49 carries. Viato is a solid quarterback, 1,200 yards passing, 65% comp rate, 5 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Sort of feels like a crapshoot when you look at this game, because I don't think there's a whole lot of players that are super talented on either team. I think Omari Kelly is a solid piece with 471 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns. In the end, I was originally going to pick Louisiana Tech. I was going to pick the home team, but I think I'm going to change my pick and go with Middle Tennessee, because I think they do have the better players on offense, and they played a tougher schedule up to this moment in time. This game really feels like it can go either way. There's 2 bad teams in Conference USA. I'm going to swap my pick late, though. I'm going to change my mind here and rock with Middle Tennessee, because I do think they have the better pieces on offense. Both defenses are just about similar. At the end of the day, I'm going to take Middle Tennessee, but I don't feel incredibly confident about it. I think this is a game where a lot could happen. I do think the total is a little high at 49.5. I expect it to go a little bit under that. I don't think there'll be a lot of points in this game. I think Middle Tennessee will get enough points in the end to get the job done and win this one. An intriguing matchup in the Conference USA game that's probably not getting a whole lot of love because the teams are 1-4 and 1-3 respectively. But it's certainly a matchup that you might want to take a look at as 2 teams kind of battle out, slugfest if you like defensive football, this is probably the game for you.
Now you look at the last game on Thursday night, UTEP, 19.5-point dogs going to Western Kentucky. Their quarterback position's also been in flux. Skylar Locklear hasn't been all that great. Cade McConnell got the start in the last game. Was only 204 yards, 53% comp rate, a touchdown and a pick. They're putting up only 16 points per game. A couple of different guys have been catching the ball for them. Kenny Odom and Cam Thomas both have 300+ yards. That's pretty admirable there. You look at Western Kentucky, their offense has struggled. They just played two good defenses. And they played very good in those games. They beat Toledo and almost beat Boston College. The passing offense has been better with Caden Veltkamp under center. The UTEP pass defense has been solid. The run D has been not very sound for UTEP, so I think we can see some better rushing opportunities for a team that definitely doesn't run the ball that much, only about 100 yards per game. But this is not, it's not their philosophy at all. Elijah Young is the lead runner. I think he'll have a pretty sound day on the ground. And the offense overall, again, has just been kind of poor for UTEP. Should really run it up here, I think, because I just don't think UTEP will have many chances to stay on the field. In Western Kentucky, they've always played a solid defense. I know they had a bad game against Alabama, whatever that happens against an opponent like that. The last 2 weeks, they've really held in there. I know they're playing Boston College's backup QB, but against a very good rushing attack, held them to only 111 yards, and then Toledo only had 325 of total offense. So this is a team that's very competitive on defense. You got guys like Upton Stout leading the way, Kylan Gittery at linebacker. This is a team that's pretty sound, Nick. I think that Western Kentucky's going to win this one by at least more than 20 points.
Yeah, I think Western Kentucky will blow out UTEP in this one. I think they'll cover the 20-point spread. I don't think UTEP's a very good team at all. It's a team that's 0-5 and really doesn't seem to have much of a pulse. They got blown out by Sam Houston State. They got blown out by Nebraska. No shame in that. They lost to an FCS team in overtime. Really not a great result. Western Kentucky, for what it's worth, yes, they got blown out by Alabama, but that's an outlier. Going to leave that out. There are other 4 games this season where they're are playing in those games where they're 3-1 in those other 4 games, including a close loss on the road at BC. They beat a good Toledo team, a Toledo team I'm very high on in the MAC. They also beat Middle Tennessee, who we just spoke about. So I think this is a Western Kentucky team that has some things. I think Veltkamp's a really solid quarterback. I think Young will have a good day on the ground. I like to see him be involved. Their top receiver, Johnson, has 30 receptions for 392 yards and 4 touchdowns, so he's been getting a lot of targets. I don't trust this UTEP team to really even be able to move the ball a whole lot here. I don't think Western Kentucky's defense is phenomenal, but they've looked better over the last 2 weeks. They looked good against Toledo and looked good against BC. I like the Hilltoppers in this one. Conference USA right now, Liberty's obviously the favorite at 5-0 in this conference, but they barely escaped FIU on Tuesday night. And when you look at that, I think Sam Houston still's got a chance in this conference. I think Western Kentucky still has a chance in this conference. The way things are shaking out, I think Western Kentucky, if they get Liberty in the conference title game, there's a real opportunity, I think, to beat that team in a matchup. I think they match up pretty well against that Liberty team. I like Western Kentucky to get another big one on the board. I'm thinking potentially putting up 45, 50, something points of that total, and really blowing out this UTEP team that I just don't think is very good. They're the bottom feeders in the conference. They don't really have a pulse on offense, and I think Western Kentucky, that is going to run away with this one.
Now we move to Friday night, Northwestern and Maryland. Pretty solid defensive affair on tap on Fox. You start with Northwestern. The run defense has been very good. They have a very nice defensive line that's deep. They have a great linebacker in the middle, Alexander Mueller. This is a Northwestern team that's been very competitive this year. Guys like Aiden Hubbard, Anto Saka. The defensive line is incredibly deep. Najee Story, another one. They have a lot of different pieces that get involved here. This is a defense that's not been giving up too much on the ground. 149 yards against Indiana is the most they've allowed all year long. Both defenses, oddly enough, have been good, but they've allowed 500 plus against Indiana last time out. So it shows you how good the Hoosiers are. But staying with this Northwestern defense, the passing D has been very stout. I know they gave about 250 to Washington, that is, on the road a couple weeks ago. That's a very good passing attack. And then, of course, the Hoosiers had their number. But the quarterback situation isn't all that great. I think Billy Edwards is doing a good job for Maryland. They do have some receivers here in Ty Felton and Caden Prather that can certainly give you a headache. But I think the quarterback's not going to be able to fully take advantage of that, even though he does have almost 300 passing yards per game, 11 touchdowns, 2 picks. Certainly has been more impressive. But I think against the tougher defense, it's certainly going to be a bit of more of an issue for him here in this one. Roman Hemby at running back. So Maryland can certainly hit you with some dual threat capabilities offense so far. I guess this certainly exceeded expectations as they now sit at 3-2. Maryland, their defense on the other hand, giving about 22 points per game. Again, they both just had some issues with Indiana. But other than that, Maryland's been pretty stout on this side of the ball. I like what they bring to the table here. Coming into the season, I felt like this would be a good defense for them. Ruben Hypolite, Dante Trader in the secondary. Some of the veterans there leading the way. Of course, the transfer Jalen Husky's been a nice addition. And then you got Caleb Wheatland at linebacker, been able to provide some negative plays. I think the biggest problem for Northwestern is their offense has also kind of exceeded expectations, but they're not really good at quarterback. Mike Wright got benched in favor of Jack Lausch. I think it certainly has been slightly beneficial for him because he's a better passer, I would say. AJ Henning and Bryce Kurtz, these are two good receivers for the Wildcats that command a lot of targets, and then Cam Porter's a physical running back. I think Northwestern, Nick, they can play good enough to cover this 10-point line. And maybe I'm going to eat my words at the end of the day because I don't think Billy Edwards is all that great. I think he's certainly exceeding expectations right now, but now he's going to face a tough defense. It'll be a little bit tougher for him to throw this football, but those are very good receivers who can burn the Wildcats. I'll take them to cover, though.
In this interesting matchup, I will take the Wildcats cover as well. I think they'll be able to keep this into a bit of a close dogfight here. I think Maryland is a solid team playing at home. I do like what Edwards has been able to do for this offense. He's added a nice level there. 1,400 yards passing, 72% comp rate, 11 touchdowns, 2 picks. He's been really solid. Takes a few sacks, probably more than he needs to, which is a bit concerning. If Northwestern can find a way to pass rush, they'll be able to hang around this game. Ty Felton's a fun receiver to watch, 642, 14 yards to grab, and 5 touchdowns, while Caden Pranther as well is not bad. And Dylan Wade, their tight end, has 2 touchdowns and 183 yards receiving, so they're getting some targets to their big traditional tight end in Wade. This is a good offense from Maryland that also has a solid defense that has played well at times. They held Virginia to 13 points. They held UConn to 7 points. A UConn team that's a lot better than people expected them to be. That's ended up being a pretty decent win, all things considered overall. I think this defense from Maryland is a solid unit. They'll get enough stops to win this game, led by Michael Harris at linebacker, who's a really solid piece with 23 total tackles, leading the way for the team. Well, they have some other decent pieces in the linebacking core and the secondary. I do think Northwestern is a good team, but I think their offense will let them down this game. Cam Porter's a solid back, right? 249 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns for him, 5 yards per carry on his 50 carries, so not bad numbers at all. I think the quarterback situation is a bit of a problem for Northwestern. Both quarterbacks I don't think are very good, and they're not really been playing great this season. Wright got benched. Lesich has come in, has not been really that great. AJ Henning is a really solid receiver, but if you double him and cover him well, it's going to be tough to find some other different pieces in this offense to catch passes other than Kurtz, who again is, I think is having a good season, but he has no touchdowns, not really been a red zone threat. I do think Northwestern will hang around this game. Their defense is good enough to keep them in it, but I think at the end of the day, Maryland will get enough punches to pull away. I'm thinking like a 7-8 point win in this one. Northwestern will cover the spread barely, but I think Maryland will get the job done ultimately. Maryland at 4-2 in the Big Ten. I think that's a solid result halfway through the season. If you look at that, I think 4-2 is not bad at all for Mike Locksley and company, as they really move very comfortably towards bowl eligibility, which I think is kind of the goal down there in Maryland right now, is get to a bowl game and see what happens from there. I've been happy with how they played on offense. I'm happy with how they played on defense. I think Maryland will win this game and get the job done in the end.
Now we look at another game going down at 9 o'clock. UNLV traveling to Utah State, coming off a heartbreaking, thrilling loss to Syracuse back home in Vegas. This team is legit, though. UNLV, Malik Williams is clearly the better quarterback, so the one that left, no one really cares. He had a great game against Syracuse. This is a guy that's throwing the ball with great efficiency. 83% comp rate through 2 games, 6 touchdowns, only 1 pick, over 400 yards. Also has some wheels as well with his rushing ability, 260 yards and 2 scores on the year. So they have a nice dual threat quarterback here, is being efficient. Ricky White is an elite receiver. Jacob DeJesus alongside him is a very complimentary number 2. While this triple option rushing attack, they get a variety of different guys involved. They're putting up 251 yards per game. Coming off, not that great of an effort running the ball against Syracuse, which was kind of expected. I figured the Orange would probably put in a pretty resilient effort. And on the defensive side of the ball, of course, McCord gave them an issue. They're not going to face many quarterbacks or passing attacks like that this year, especially not against Spencer Petras or Bryson Barnes, whichever quarterback they roll with. Neither are all that great. Transfers from, pretty high-end Power 5 schools. Jackson Woodard, Jalen Catalon's transfer. He's done big for them in the secondary. Woodard is a phenomenal player at linebacker. Next to him, Manai Powell. This is a defense, Nick. Again, they've played, they just played the toughest offense, one of the toughest they'll see all year. So it certainly was a less than stellar effort, giving up, almost 500 total yards of offense. On the other hand, though, Utah State giving up over 41 points per game, and of their own right, they've played tough offenses. USC, Boise, Utah, even though it was a backup quarterback, they went on the road to Temple, though, and still gave up almost 500 yards and 45 points. So even though they've played tough teams, they've also played bad ones and not been very good. UNLV is going to roll in this one as long as they protect the ball. don't turn it over like Utah did a couple of weeks ago that led to that being a 17-point loss. They should be able to cover this line here, 18.5. I think UNLV's focused, motivated. Going on the road's always tough, but I think that this is going to be an easy game for them because they're that good of a football team.
This is a phenomenal team. I know they lost some wind in their sails in their overtime loss to Syracuse, and that certainly is disappointing for them in terms of the Group of 5 playoff implications. Although it's not a bad loss, those to a Power 4 team. That's a good Power 4 team in Syracuse. So things may still shake out in their favor, although they're going to need a lot of help from other teams losing out there if they want to get into the playoff. UNLV, though, still, they know the script, right? They got to go out there and win games. Utah State, on the other hand, they're 4-1. Not a great team. Got shut out, blown out by USC. Got run all over by Boise State and Ashton Jeanty. No shame in that. Jeanty, probably going to win the Heisman. But still, not a great performance for them, losing 62-30. Spencer Petras, kind of a throwback, like, oh, wow, that guy is still playing college football. Not having an incredible season, really not that great. 63% comp rate, 810 yards passing, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Not great, really, at all for him. When you look at UNLV, this is an offense that's fun to watch, an offense that's worth watching. Hajj Malik Williams has jumped in and has had no issues. 409 yards passing, 6 touchdowns at 1 pick. Also leads the team in rushing, 34 carries for 260 and 2 touchdowns. He's really good. Ricky White, the third, is so fun to watch. 30 receptions, 388 yards receiving, and 6 touchdowns. He's really plugged in with Williams. They're working together phenomenally. They're really solid duo, a nice 1-2 punch. Utah State, they have a decent running back room at times. They're able to run the ball effectively, but overall, I think this is a team that's going to struggle here. I know they're playing at home, but in general, I don't highly rate this Utah State team. I think they're not great. Losing by a bunch of points at Temple, not a great look in my opinion. It's not a very good Temple team at all, and then getting shut out by USC and blown out by Boise State is not helping your case. I think he covers the spread in this one. A bit lofty at 18.5, but I think they'll be able to win this game by 20, 25 points, something like that. I like this offense to have a really good day, set the tempo early on, run up the score, put up a ton of points on the board. Looking at that 40 to 50 point mark, I think, is very achievable for UNLV, who have a really good defense and will be able to force a lot of stops and turnovers to get the ball back for their offense that has been really dynamite and reignited under Williams after the opt-out of their previous quarterback. I like UNLV by a boatload in this one. Again, they still got a lot to play in front of them. If they beat Boise State, they can still play their way into the conversation for the Group of 5 spot in the playoff, in my opinion. So they know the script. They're going to go out and absolutely dominate in this one.
And then the nightcap, 10:30 Eastern time on ESPN, Utah, 6-point favorites. Going to Arizona State, 4-1 Sun Devil team. Sam Leavitt, I thought he'd be a pretty good addition to this team. He's throwing for over 200 yards per game. Guys like Jordan Tyson, I thought would be a breakout star for them, coming back from injury. Xavier Gilroy, Shimon Mateer. They got a couple of different options in the passing game. It's really been the Cam Scatterby show on offense. 615 rushing and 6 scores. He's also the second leading receiver. This is a heck of a ball player. Love what he brings to the table. Going up against the Utah defense, it's very sound, though. They've not really cracked much. The most they've allowed all year in a game was 385 yards to Utah State. This is still a very immense defense. They have a lot of great talent. Van Fillinger up front, Junior Tafuno at defensive tackle. In the middle, guys like Lander Barton, very good. Connor O'Toole, certainly hope that he continues to stay healthy. This is a team that's got a lot of veterans. Their secondary may be a bit of a worry, and I think against tougher opponents, they might certainly get burned due to the youth and maybe the bit of a lack of talent in that regard. This is a very sound defense. They don't give up anything on the ground. Very dominant against the run. I think you're going to see that here. The biggest question mark with Utah is if Cam Rising's going to play. Isaac Wilson's done as good as he can for being, as a true freshman, rushed into action for a team that, isn't exactly loaded with weapons by any means. Cam Rising, of course, is just such a good leader, such a good football player. He gets the job done. Brant Keithy at tight end, great player. Dorian Singer's been a nice emerging wide receiver for them after a disappointing season for USC last fall. And then Money Parks as well. So they have a nice trio of pass catchers, and the run game was led by a physical O-line. Micah Bernard heading the charge there. I think Mike Mitchell's been giving them some good minutes as well. Wilson, though, Nick, 55% comp rate, 7 interceptions and 6 touchdowns. It's been tough. It's been real hard sledding for him. He's been admirable for them, but they need Cam Rising back if they want to compete in this conference, and he's still week to week with the injury. Is he going to play? We really don't know. I'm going to go ahead and assume he will, and they'll cover, and I think they still will, even if he doesn't play, because this run defense is going to slow down the best part of the ASU offense, because it really does run through Scatterby. But this is tough times for Utah right now. They can waste another season if Rising cannot get back on the field.
I agree with your assessment there. I think Utah will win this game and cover the spread because of that run defense. I think Scadaboo is an incredible player. I love watching him. Right, 111 carries for 615 yards and 6 touchdowns. 111 carries. Wow, he's getting an absolute boatload of carries. But I think they'll be able to stop him and really stuff the run and cause some issues. This is the most interesting game of the six we've talked about. Save the best for last because this is a big implicator in the Big 12. Arizona State 4-1 did not expect them to be there at this moment in time, and they really could be 5-0. They lost to Texas Tech on the road. Probably should have won that game down there in Lubbock. This is a fun team under a good head coach in Dillingham, who has been really fun to watch. I think Levitt's been really solid. Plugged him in, 1,000 yards passing, 7 touchdowns, 3 picks. He's really solid. I think he's a good player. Tyson's been a good receiver for them, 20 receptions for 285 and 3 touchdowns. I really do like what I've seen out of this offense. This is a fun Arizona State offense. Meanwhile, Utah, in the preseason, I said, the one thing that would hold this team back from winning the Big 12 would be injuries. And Utah fans came at me and they didn't like that I said that. But it's true, right? If Cam Rising doesn't play, this is a totally different team. Wilson is not a great quarterback compared to Rising. 830, 6 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Not a good ratio, not a good performance for him. Micah Bernard, he needs to really step up in this game. 82 carries, 547 and 1 touchdown for him, while Singer's been a good receiver for this team, but no touchdowns so far. I want to see they get him involved in the red zone. I think if Rising doesn't play, this will be a very close game. I still think Utah will win and cover because the line is at 6 at time of recording. Utah, I think they're a good team, but I think they're in a little bit of trouble in the Big 12 big picture because of the injuries. I think it's going to continue to be a problem. I said in the preseason, I'm still going to stand by what I said. I think Arizona State will certainly give them a scare in this game. I think Arizona State will go pound for pound, but in the end, that run defense for Utah will be the one to get the job done, get a couple of key stops, potentially on a 4th down stop late in the game, and give Utah the win in this one. They'll pull away, they'll escape Tempe with a win, but it certainly won't be pretty. That's kind of becoming a place that's not incredibly easy to play. We've seen them have a lot of success at home this season. The Arizona State Sun Devils is 3-0 at home, including wins over an SEC program early in the year. I know Mississippi State, but still an SEC program nonetheless at home. This is a very intriguing matchup. I'll be trying to stay up and watch this one Friday night because it does have big implications in the Big 12. If Arizona State upsets Utah here, goes to 5-1, it's a whole new bowl game for them. The conference is wide open. They could really be part of that potentially down the line. I don't think that's going to happen. I'll take Utah on this one, but that's certainly a game I want to keep my eye on.
That's going to be it for today's episode. As always, Nick, appreciate you joining me. And one thing on Utah is I think they'll be just fine if they can survive this game. They'll be in a lot of trouble if they don't. The next two are pretty favorable, TCU and Houston. And I think they get a bye week after that before they enter a very daunting stretch that has a couple of ranked teams in there, BYU, Iowa State, and then road trips to Colorado and UCF. So things can get really hairy for Utah. If they win this game, though, I think they'll be all right. They'll have enough time to get things corrected, but it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out for the Utes. As always, Nick, thank you. Interesting straight slate here, only 6 games. Some of them a lot of people probably don't care about. There's a lot of people that love betting action. We certainly like to give an input.
Yeah, this is an interesting slate. I think the Thursday, Friday games are really solid in October. There's a lot of different games going on during the midweek slates on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, that is. In the month of October, I think these games are interesting. I think the JMU game is certainly worth watching on Thursday night. I think the Utah game is certainly worth watching on Friday night. These are fun matchups, a lot of implications in some of these smaller conferences, lower Power 4 conference, aka the Big 12, and then some of the better G5 conferences are worth watching. Some of these matchups, some of these are conference title game eliminators. Really interesting games and certainly worth tuning in if you're a college football fan.
Make sure you guys like, subscribe, comment. See you next time.